Hi, good morning, 3A4. Welcome back to Social Studies and welcome back to Chapter 3. To recall, Chapter 3 is the chapter after Chapter 2. Chapter 2 was on the trade-offs that government makes, the common good, the organs of state, so the legislature, parliament, the executive, cabinet, and the judiciary, the Supreme Court. And Chapter 3 is now about the powers of government in society, in particular the executive. So we are really looking and narrowing in on the executive, the cabinet, the day-to-day administration and ruling of Singapore, and why is it that we need a government. Before I carry on, you should have this worksheet with you, the 3A worksheet, which looks like this. And let me briefly outline what you will learn in this lesson. You will learn the 4 ways. Again, you should have a highlighter, your writing materials, take notes, and fill in the blanks as I go through this worksheet. You should be able to describe 4 ways that the government works for the good of society. And the 4 ways are actually here in the next objective. It's about maintaining security and order, ensuring justice, providing public goods and services, and safeguarding the interests of citizens. So I'm going to launch into the lesson now, where I outline these 4 ways for you. Take notes as I go through. Take a moment to read this quote by JeanJacques Rousseau in 1762. So this is about 250 years ago. And JeanJacques Rousseau, you might have guessed he is or you can't guess, right? He's someone who was living in Geneva, Switzerland, but he's a Frenchman. And he says, "It is solely on the basis of the common interest that every society should be governed. At the time, this is a very radical proposition. Right now, you are not surprised because all governments come to elections and they say, vote for us because we will serve you and do the right things by Singapore. But in 1762, it's a world of kings and monarchies, and societies are not governed for common interests, they are governed to benefit the kings and then to benefit the nobles. And who cares about the peasants?" Oh, the dogs are barking. Okay. So this was a radical idea. But today we have accepted this idea as a common understanding that all societies need to benefit the common interest. And when we say common interest, what do we mean? Can we be clear? Can we be specific? So maybe you take a minute, pause, and think, what do you understand by common interest? And let's recap chapter 2, because in chapter 2 we did talk about this idea of a common good. So a common good and a common interest, at this point you can take them as the same thing. And we said that the common good is the shared interest of all Singaporeans, of all of Singapore. In other words, most of Singapore or all of Singapore will want certain things, right? They are not very controversial. They are quite um universal. There are things that everyone will desire. So what are these things? And suppose there are such things that exist, right? Then who provides them? And the answer, of course, is government. So who is government? Government is the group of officials in charge of making public policy and leading the country. The elected version of these are the ministers. The non-elected version actually are the civil service. And in Singapore, there are perhaps 80,000 civil servants in the different ministries, working to craft policy, to enact policy. For example, for example. Every time you exchange trace together Bluetooth with someone else, and let's say someone has gotten infected with COVID, and the person who calls you, right, they are likely to be working for the civil service. Uh, the person who created this policy of trace together was from the civil service. The people who went around to shopping malls to check that these things are being set up are from the civil service. And sometimes the civil service does outsource, so they get other people to be their safe distancing ambassadors and so on and so forth. But in the end, all the money for these projects and the design for these projects and the people who ordered these projects are from the civil service. Okay. And ministers in civil service are part of the executive branch. So we call there are three branches: legislature, executive, and judiciary. Three branches, three organs of state. We are talking specifically in this lesson about the executive, the ministers, and the civil service. And these are the four functions. These are the four things that we hold to be a common good. One is security and order. We agree in general that it's better to be safe and unviolated and unharmed and not to be randomly robbed or attacked in the middle of the night or to be invaded by another country. So this is something we hold to be a common good: security and order. The second is justice. Justice in the narrow criminal sense of if someone commits an offense or a crime, they should be prosecuted and penalties have to be imposed. But justice also in a broader sense, uh, and some of you may have heard of this term called social justice. And sometimes we ask if the government can enact laws and rules that better protect all people regardless of their minority status. The third good is public goods, and some of you may be familiar with this term. It's actually a term that is derived from economics. There is a specific economic definition for public goods. It refers to goods that are non-excludable. That is, goods that uh, cannot be denied to anyone in the country, and goods that are non-rivalrous. That is, if I use the good, it doesn't reduce the good for someone else. That sounds very weird. If I use this, someone else can equally use it. What does that mean? A very clear example is clean air. Clean air. So, for example, if I breathe clean air now, um, it doesn't reduce the amount of clean air that you get to breathe. Okay. And then your question will be, why is that a public good? Why does the government need to take care of clean air? Doesn't clean air just exist? And the answer is no. If you have been to China, you have been to Beijing, especially in the 2010s, 2010 era, you will know that clean air is not something that naturally exists because there can be smog, and smog can cover the whole country. And where does smog come from? It comes from factories, right? So, in a sense, if you want someone to safeguard that clean air, and trust me, no one in the country thinks about clean air on a regular daily basis, right? Then you need to set up some organization that takes care of the clean air, and that's our government, specifically the Ministry of Sustainability right now. Okay. Um, the last public good, safeguards for citizens. These are specifically economic, financial safeguards. When I say the word safeguard, what do you think? You think of something that protects you. That is correct. So the government finds ways to protect people from falling through the cracks. What does falling through the cracks mean? It means that if you are out of a job, if you are getting old, if you're unemployed, um, is there any way to ensure that you have some amount of money to tide you over, to protect the most vulnerable and maybe the people with the fewest resources in our society? That is a safeguard. And I'll go through all these in detail through this lesson. So let's keep charging through. So you should be on page 1 of your notes now. And we will talk about external security. So the first idea of external security, external clearly meaning outside Singapore, meaning other countries, meaning protecting Singapore in times of war. You can write that down. External security is preventing war and protecting Singapore in a war. So our founding father Lee Kuan Yew said in 2011, we are in a very turbulent region. The word turbulent means that there is a lot of chaos and a lot of negative things happening. If you've been on a plane before and you're flying and the captain says we are encountering some turbulence, that word means that the plane will start shaking madly, right? We're in a very turbulent region. If we do not have a government and a people that can defend ourselves, Singapore will cease to exist. So Lee Kuan Yew is actually making a very radical statement, right? It's not just about whether or not we lose some money, it's that we will disappear altogether. And then Lee Kuan Yew goes on, we are not vulnerable. He's asking a rhetorical question, right? He's asking you in a sort of shocked and uh, uh, in a shocked and sort of disbelieving way. We are not vulnerable. They can besiege you, you'll be dead. Your sea lanes are cut off and your business comes to a halt. We are living in an adult world. Why do we have peace? Because it is not cost free if you hit us. If you hit us, we will hit you and the damage may be more on your side. In other words, Lee Kuan Yew is saying, why is no one coming to attack Singapore? Because Singapore will punch back and we have a pretty good punch. And what's our punch called? It's called the Singapore Armed Forces. So now let's explore the Singapore Armed. Okay, so this comes from this book, Hard Truths, which I read 2 years ago. And the old man has quite a lot of interesting ideas. Of course, as a source, it has its own biases and beliefs that you may not agree with, but it's a very fruitful and interesting read. I recommend it, especially if you have some time this holiday. Okay, let me move on. Okay, so this is our turbulent region. Sorry for the low quality map, but vaguely Singapore is here. You can't see it because we are very small. And above us is Malaysia, below us is Indonesia. Okay. And in 1998, the Indonesian president, he's very famous for this quote. Uh, there are 211 million people in Indonesia in 1998, says Habibie. All the green is Indonesia. Sorry, on this map it's not green, it's yellow. All the yellow is Indonesia. And that red dot is Singapore. You can't even see it. So if you've ever heard of people calling Singapore a little red dot, now you know that it came from this Indonesian president called Habibie, who was not praising us. He was mocking us. He was saying all this yellow is Indonesia. You can't even see the red dot that's Singapore. In other words, how big are you? You're too small. You're puny. I don't care about you. That's what Habibie is saying. Of course, today when we say little red dot, we say with a bit of pride because we have taken his phrase and sort of taken it for our own users. Okay. So our neighbors think of us as very small, which physically and literally is true. We are very small. And we have had history where um international conflict, sort of low level conflict has occurred, in particular confrontasi about 50 years ago. Ask your Sec 2 history teacher about this. Okay, I'll move on. So there have been conflict that Singapore has been involved in. Oh, this one. So in 1991, Goh Chok Tong was our prime minister. Okay, and this was National Day parade, and on National Day parade, you sort of show off how good your country is, right? National Day is a day to celebrate Singapore, and just so happened on this day, uh, Malaysia and Indonesia decided to have a naval exercise where they send their ships around and show off their military. And the message to Singapore was, uh, watch out. We are still very active and you are very small. And if anyone knows this picture, it's actually emergency mobilization. So all the uncles in their 30s and 40s suddenly had to wear their green uniform and run to their mobilization, and the armed forces had to mobilize, blah blah blah. Okay, and this was just an example to show how we must always be prepared and ready, right? So that 20 years later, when Lee Kuan Yew is recounting all these things, he can say, uh, we are safe, wake up. It's not true. We must always be alert. Having said all this, setting the context of confrontasi and the various military exercises, we come to the Singapore Armed Forces. So the Singapore Armed Forces is important precisely because of the context where military conflict is ever present in the turbulent region. And so let's look at the worksheet. Okay, security is about ensuring the safety of Singapore. The blank in the first page is Singapore from external threats. And in 1966, the SAF was formed. It has 3 services: Army, Navy, and Air Force. In 1970, Singapore passed the Enlistment Act. The Enlistment Act conscripts. Conscripts means that people in the country are forced to join the army. Conscription is the forcible recruitment of male citizens to the armed forces. And because of this Enlistment Act, our army is actually enormous. Adding the active and reserve personnel of the Singapore Armed Forces, note that Singapore has 5 million people. Okay, our army plus reserves is bigger than Japan's army plus reserve. Japan has 100 million people. We have 5 million people, but our army is bigger than Japan's. Okay, think about that. Okay, so the rest of this page describes how. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So Japan has 300,000. We have 1.2 million. Our SAF is enormous. Okay. And honestly, if you think about it, if we have 5 million people and 1.2 million of our people are actually potential soldiers, it's literally a nation at war, right? Okay. So the rest of this page, please read through, especially the box on how does Singapore ensure national security. Because these things about national service, defense spending, and defense treaties, you might imagine, are your evidence for an SRQ question 7, right? This is what you use in a question 7 when, for example, the question could be, is ensuring security or providing public goods more important in improving the welfare of Singaporeans? So you would have to argue both factors, and this is your evidence. Okay, why is security important? So again, these 3 things, go and highlight, go and read up. Why is security important? It's about protecting lives. Having a strong armed forces will deter attacks on Singaporean. And it's about protecting the economy because it prevents the interruption of our sea lanes, which is so vital for the sea trade, which is so vital for Singapore's economy. That's what Lee Kuan Yew said a few slides ago about the sea lanes. This is what he means. And it's about psychological assurance, finally. Just the fact that you have a huge army sort of lets a lot of people feel that we are safe in this country. We can start a family. We can live here for the long term. It builds confidence. These 3 things below, why is security important, is not in your notes. Can I suggest that you copy at least 2 of these ideas down? Why? Because this, you think about it, again, this is your evidence and this is your explanation in any SSSA. It could be, for example, is external security more important in serving the good of society than ensuring justice? And so this is your evidence and explanation for the security argument. Pause, copy, and then I move on. Okay, internal order. We are on page 2 now of your notes. Internal order is about ensuring that people feel safe in the country. I'm going to skip the video, but let me just briefly describe what a lack of internal order looks like. Okay, a lack of internal order is when the people have no confidence in the government, and they take hostile and violent action to damage property and people around the country. And an example of this would be the Hong Kong protests. So you can go uh, right. You can actually see that public institutions like in Hong Kong they call it MTR, it's our MRT. MTR stations are being damaged and suspected bomb. I mean, yes, you target the police forces and the government, but how can you control who gets hurt? So a lot of people will feel unsafe in Hong Kong at this time, right? Okay, so that's what a lack of internal order looks like. I hope this triggers a bit of sense in you of why it is important to maintain internal order. And it is important to maintain. And let's say that this is not unique to Hong Kong. In 2013, remember Miss Neng talked about this earlier in the year, we had Little India riots. So the Little India riot started when a bus ran over, I think it ran over a migrant worker, um, I think from Bangladesh, but you have to look into this. I can't remember specifically. And the people, especially the migrant workers from India and Bangladesh who were drinking at the time, got enraged and they started attacking property, attacking government institutions. And they were enraged because they thought that the country wasn't protecting them, these migrant workers. Whether or not that is a correct judgment, the response was certainly wrong because it damaged internal order and led to many people being hurt, and also led to the law that you can't buy alcohol after 10:30 p.m. Literally, it is because of this riot. Not that it affects you, it affects me. Okay, violent crime. So, other examples of a lack of order would be when people are being robbed or when there are gang fights. And so, who protects our internal order? It is our Singapore police force. If you're seeing these people around in the train stations, they're actually from the police force. These people you won't see because they're actually the investigation officers, right? They're wearing plain clothes, but they're actually very important in tracking down the suspects of crimes, looking through CCTV records, interviewing eyewitnesses, these people. So on page 2, the mission of the police is to prevent, deter, and detect crime to ensure the safety of Singapore. The divisions of the police include the investigation department, to track down the criminals. The traffic police, people often forget that they exist, but they're really important. Public transport security command. And how is the police force structured? This is something you should know. There are regional headquarters in Singapore, and each regional headquarters takes care of a number of neighborhood police centers. So actually, you would realize this every day you walk out of school, you walk past. Okay, imagine you are walking out the side gate with the turnstile, right? You walk to the train station, Dakota entrance. Let's say that you walk past Dakota entrance. You walk towards the HDB, towards the canal. You actually pass by a neighborhood police station. Is it the Mountbatten neighborhood police station? Whichever it is, right? There's actually a police station there. That is a neighborhood police center. It's one of the small centers scattered all across Singapore that reports to a regional headquarters that's bigger. In this case, it might report to the one in Marine Parade. Marine Parade has the big building, right? Okay. So please copy down these things in the first box: traffic police, neighborhood police center. What is public order about? 4 components: making streets safe, rehabilitating criminals, that is trying to assuming that people are not bad at heart. So if you are a criminal, you have made a mistake, you've committed an offense, yes, you serve your time, you pay the price, you face the consequence, but after that consequence, you should be allowed to live out your normal life, right? It's not a permanent punishment. This is the whole idea of forgiveness, rehabilitation, yellow ribbon project. Okay, managing borders, ensuring that people who come to Singapore don't bring in contraband. Example, don't bring in drugs. Example, don't bring in weapons like rifles or bombs. And preventing terrorism. So these are four elements of public order, as well as the groups or the institutions that have the responsibility to maintain these four elements. So please copy them down. Let me go to the worksheet. We are here, right? Why is ensuring justice, security, and maintaining order important? I think some of it was already covered in the earlier slide. So these ideas are all very salient. But also, what other ideas do you have? Why is maintaining order important? Maybe ensuring the safety of people in Singapore, right? So this would entail protecting our property and our life in case of threat of violence from others. The property and lives of innocent citizens. So these are some ideas you should have in your head about why does it matter to ensure security and maintain internal order. Okay, sorry, this video is 27 minutes already. I'm gonna zoom forward. So once you're done with that, flip. Homicide rate. Homicide means murder. Homicide means murder. Rate means how often does it happen. And if you look at this graph, at least in these years, around 2012, 2011, the Philippines is clearly somewhere you need to be careful because people are being murdered more frequently than other countries. And look, Singapore is 0.2. So Singapore and Japan are doing very well. We are, in general, not murdering each other as often as happens in other countries. Good. Good. Keep it up. Don't murder people. Okay. So this is a statistic to show that we are doing quite well on internal order. Or you could even argue that it is precisely because our internal order, our Singapore police force is so efficient, that is why we have such a good and low homicide rate. Okay. Justice. Page 3. Justice is ensuring, please read this at the top of page 3, that everyone is treated fairly and equally. Because it is a matter of human dignity. If you are a human being, you want to be treated as fairly and in the same way as others. You don't want to be shortchanged. You don't want to feel like you are inferior. And so justice is the ideal that protects this desire to be treated with dignity, to be treated equally. The golden rule, and you should write this down, is a rule of reciprocity. It's a rule of reciprocity. It's a rule that you should treat other people the way you want to be treated. Example, if I want other people to talk nicely to me, I should talk nicely to them. And if I insult them, then I should expect that they'll insult me back. That's the golden rule. It's reciprocity. And sometimes people get into conflict because this golden rule is not respected. Example, you insult someone, they insult you back, and you get pissed. But the question is, why are you pissed? You started it, right? So this idea of a golden rule. Okay, let me skip. Okay. So there are 4 components that will run us from human rights to the idea of justice. Okay? I skipped a video that would explain human rights because I don't want to eat up your time. If you want to watch the video, I can give you the link. I'll summarize it. The point is that human rights is an idea, a belief that as long as you are a human person, you deserve certain protections. You deserve certain protections. That's a human right. And remember that in chapter 1 on citizenship, we talked about rights. So, what protections do we deserve? Example, you deserve to be safe when you're walking around, right? That's a right. Which means that everyone is responsible not to attack you. How are you safe when you're walking around? Is when we don't rob and beat you wantonly and illegally and arbitrarily and randomly. Recall in chapter 1 on citizenship, we talk about rights and responsibilities. It's this idea that we are borrowing now in chapter 3. Your right to be safe becomes our responsibility to not attack you. Agree? So far, so good. And so, the idea of a law is a collective agreement in society to ban attacks. If your right to be safe means it's our responsibility not to attack, then we should just codify, make explicit, write down this responsibility as a law. So we ban attacks. And justice is the idea that if someone violates the law, breaks the law, offends against the law, commits a crime which is defined as breaking a criminal law, then justice is about correcting and punishing anyone who has broken this law. See that from your right, it becomes our responsibility that's written down into a law that is then made substantial by a justice system. This is the concept of justice in society. Okay. So I'm going to move on page 3. Okay, before I move on to page 3, look at these examples. A thief being beaten up in Malaysia, an alleged rapist, so this person's accused of being a rapist, being lynched. Lynch means that a group of people come together and do violence on this person. And it's often associated with very emotional sort of emotional outbursts, violently attacking. This one in India, this person is alleged to be a cow slaughterer. Now in India, you cannot slaughter cows because cows are held to be sacred animals, and so this person was accused of slaughtering the cow, and he was lynched. Is this justice? Is this justice? We call this mob justice, we call this vigilante justice. It's not justice. It's not justice because it's not carried out by the government. Why does it matter that the government is the one that carries out justice? Two reasons. The first reason is that private justice or vigilante justice or mob justice is not calculated, it's not proportionate, right? The punishment that's inflicted by these people, as feel good as it is, does not accord to certain calculations that are embedded in our common law codes to make it fair to everyone. Example, does every cow slaughterer in India uh, get lynched? If they don't all get lynched, why should there be a difference in treatment, right? Then it's no longer fair, it's no longer justice. The problem of process is that was there even a proper investigation to establish beyond reasonable doubt that this person is a cow slaughterer? Was it proven? Where's the evidence? Our justice system does all these things. Get evidence, determine the severity of the crime, determine the punishment. A mob lynching does not care for evidence in general, and then imposes an arbitrary punishment that's not calculated based on the laws. So it's not fair. That's the first problem. The second problem is that crimes are an offense against society at large. It's an offense against society because you have broken a rule that is protecting all of us. So who gets to dispense justice is society, represented by the government, represented by the judges, right? Who are impartial and who are meant to be a microcosm of society. It's not by these private citizens enacting a vendetta. That's not justice. So it's the wrong group, firstly, and it's the wrong process, secondly, and that's why mob justice is not justice. Okay. So justice as a public duty. This is Supreme Court, or this Attorney General's chambers. Attorney General's chambers is all the lawyers employed by the government who prosecute criminals. Basically, every time someone commits a crime, it's the government's lawyers that are prosecuting. Okay. So in fact, the people administering justice are public servants. They represent society. Prosecutors from the AGC, the judges, the law clerks, and we pay for this using taxpayer money. Why is justice a public duty? We talked a bit about this in the previous example of mob justice. And the two reasons, like we said, are due process and the fairness of punishment. So can you please write this down on page 3? When someone commits a criminal offense, the state prosecutes that person and is to ensure due process and fairness of punishment. Please write this down. And why is ensuring justice important? So due process, fairness of punishment. Why is ensuring justice important? Because people want to be treated fairly and equally according to the wrongdoings, the degree of wrongdoing we have committed, right? So this would be the criminals. And because people who were wronged or unfairly or the victims of crimes want a sense that they are offenders or those or criminals or will get their just desert, right? Because if you are a victim, you want to know that there's someone out there who will do the right thing, who will get justice for you, and that is in fact AGC and the Supreme Court or the High Courts, the court system. And you can think of other reasons why justice is important. Let me give you just one final reason, which is because companies that want to invest want to be clear that the laws protecting their property will be enforced. So, example, if let's say L'Oreal, the French company, wants to invest in Singapore and build a factory, build a manufacturing plant, they don't want to put a few $100 million in Singapore just for the next day they built the factory so nice already. The government say, you know what, this factory is now ours. We are taking all this money. The company will feel shortchanged. They won't even want to put money in. And in fact, across the world, there are countries which just seize property like that. And of course, then the economy suffers because no foreign company wants to put money in. So having a good justice system protects people's property and sets up a good investment climate. So think about these ideas. These ideas really are at the core of justice. Okay. I'm sorry, I promised that I'll be faster, but I'm still quite slow. Let me try to be faster. Let me finish up now. Public goods. A good is something that we desire or that we pay to consume. You can write this down on page 4. Example, McChicken, filet o fish, these are goods. These are things we want, we desire, we want to consume. What is a public good? I'm going to create a typology of goods for you. Okay, Uniqlo. And houses. These are all goods. These are things that we want. What about train stations and train tracks and trains? Who pays for this? It's clearly a good. You see, it's desirable. It's something you want. You want to use the train to travel to Dakota and then come to school. It's convenient. But who pays? Who pays for it? You could say you pay for it through your EZ-Link. Tap tap. But is that few cents enough to even pay for all this MRT infrastructure? And to start with, before the MRT can collect money from you, they had to build all these train tracks. So who pays? Who pays for the canal that channels all the rainwater from the drains? Who pays for this highway? Who pays for all these things? Answer is that you pay. The government pays for these things first, but the government collects the money from you through taxes. So in fact, we all pay for these things through taxes. And these are called public goods. So please write it down. Private goods are things that you pay for yourself, like a hamburger. And public goods are things that the government pays for everyone, like street lights, like public transport. So again, private goods you pay for yourself, public goods the government pays for everyone. The problem is that everyone wants public goods. No single person would have paid for it. It wouldn't exist. And that's why we need the government to provide the goods. Think about it. On page 4, there are different public goods that you enjoy on a regular basis. Can you write down the benefits of these goods? How does the government collect money to... Okay. So how does the government collect money to provide these goods? Taxes. Right, taxes. Collecting money from the people to pay for public goods used by the people. So this is taxes. Why is providing public goods and services important? Can I let you do this yourself? Okay. So let me now fly to the last item on role of government, economic safeguards. What would make for a good life? I know I'm going to say think about it, but I'm sure you're just going to watch the video and listen to my answer. So I'm just going to give you some elements of a good life: living comfortably, having a good job, and in this case, not having to work in old age, right? Being able to retire gracefully. And notice that all these elements, having a good home, a good job, not retiring gracefully, not working in old age, this is all problems to do with money. As Jack Neo once put it in one of his iconic films, money not enough, which is the perennial problem of Singaporeans. So what can the government do? Clearly, it cannot give everyone more and more money. That's not how the economy works. If you give everyone in Singapore more and more money, one of two things will happen. Either A, inflation happens, money just becomes worthless. So the hamburger goes from $3 to $30. But in fact, everyone's standard of living remains the same. It's just the numbers change. Or B, you could potentially help everyone's standard of living increase by giving them more money if you borrow from other countries. So you increase your debt. So this current generation lives well and all our children will suffer. So these are the two possibilities. In other words, really, the government cannot just give everyone money. It doesn't work. What does work? How can the government ensure that people have a comfortable house, a decent salary, and to retire gracefully if the government can't just give all of us money? Is there some magic solution? The answer is there's no magic solution, but there are some little fixes that the government does that are working. What are they? How can the government help? So it turns out that the government can provide safeguards to help those who are most vulnerable in society. Example, a housing grant. So for first time applicant means you don't already have your own house, right? So if you don't have a house, the government gives you some money to get a house. That's called a housing grant. A grant is government gives you money. That's what a grant is. Government gives money, a grant. $40,000, that's a lot. So please write it down. A housing grant, $14,000, $40,000 per person for the first time applicant to HDB. What about work? The government can't provide jobs for everyone, but the government can ensure that certain positions with low pay get a bit of a boost. And this is something we talked about in CCE, the progressive wage model. What does it mean? It means that security guards and cleaners will get a minimum monthly wage. So I think it's around 1.2k, 1.3k. And there are opportunities for them to promote. So again, protecting the most vulnerable, in this case, the people who are working the jobs with a lowest pay. And finally, how to help people retire gracefully. The Central Provident Fund, the CPF, Ms. Nung has taught you this. It means that you set aside 20% of your money every month in a piggy bank. This piggy bank is called the CPF. And from age 55, you can start taking money out of the piggy bank. The word mandatory, what does it mean? It means compulsory. You have no choice. Every month, 20% of my salary will go to CPF. I already know. I can see it in my paycheck. Right? So the government is helping us help ourselves. And you can imagine not everyone agrees with this. That's why there are some CPF protests here and there. Let's look a bit more closely at CPF. On page 5, you can read a bit of my description of the CPF. But the main thing here to note is that as long as you are below 55, you are paying 20% of your monthly salary. In fact, your boss will have to pay some also, so you get a lot of money into the CPF. But once you get to be above 55, you pay less and less. Why? Why are you paying less and less as you go older? Because this CPF is meant for your retirement. It's meant to help you live a dignified life. You know, you don't have to go around begging for money. You have this CPF piggy bank money to rely on, which means that if you are growing older and older, right, you will have fewer and fewer, in general, years left to be on this earth, and so there's no need to save up so much money. You can start spending it. Does that make sense? Okay. So the last question, what do you notice about the CPF contribution rates? Or you can notice multiple things. For example, you can notice that your contribution gets lower as you grow older, and now you know why. You can also notice that the employer contribution, the company will pay more as you get older, which is interesting. I'm not sure why also. Can go and look into it. Social Studies Research Project over December. Why does the company pay more than you when you are old? Okay, whatever. Next. Oh, and we are done with the slides, but we are not done with the worksheet. We are not done with the worksheet. Give me the last 3 minutes. So in the last page of your notes, I discussed the progressive wage model, and it's a minimum wage on specific sectors. What are the sectors? Security, cleaning, landscaping. So the government sets a minimum wage in these three sectors. These notes might be outdated soon. The government, as you have been hearing, right, has been discussing this idea of a living wage, right? So this model might be extended to more sectors, or the government might even just declare that all sectors must have a certain minimum wage. For now, the government goes by progressive wage model. The opposition, Workers' Party, has been calling for a universal minimum wage. What's the difference? The difference is that whereas the progressive wage model says only certain sectors get this minimum, and the minimum is not even the same, it's different across the different sectors. Government is saying different sector, different conditions, different context, different circumstance, so different wages, right? But the PWM also gives each of these sectors a certain progression model. That's why it's called progressive, because you can promote within these sectors. Or I think my friend said something like, in the cleaning services, once you learn a course on how to use a vacuum cleaner, then you get to promote to the next rank because your skills have increased, something like that. Okay, so should we go for universal minimum wage? Why or why not? Think about it. Write your thoughts. Why are providing economic safeguards important? So look back on these three things: the housing grant, the progressive wage model, the CPF. Why must we protect our most vulnerable people in society? Actually, this is a very deep level question. Let me give you a thought. Okay, we have to protect the most vulnerable people in society because we can never know when we might lose our fortunes and become vulnerable. So it's a bit like protecting yourself in advance. And it is right and fair that those with less get more help. So this is one possible way to think about it. Or another way, providing safeguards will give Singaporeans a psychological assurance that the government stands ready to prevent them from falling into dire straits and being forced into a life of poverty. So many ideas might come to you. Please feel free to write whichever ideas come to you or think about it. And write out this box as homework. Okay. Or well, there's no point. You can't ask questions. I can't answer. So that's the end of this worksheet. To recap, there are four ways that the government works for the good of society. One, by providing security and order. Two, by providing justice. Three, providing public goods, which happens because no one would pay for a highway, only the government, right? And four, by providing safeguards. And these four ways that the government provides for the public good happens because the government is in charge of making policy to increase the common good, the shared interest of all Singaporeans. So this ties chapter 2 and 3A. Okay, think about it. It's been a 55-minute lesson. Have a good break. Okay, bye.